Hello, everyone. My name is Ty Harding. I'll be presenting my older adult oral video presentation. I decided to break this presentation into two parts, understanding I'll probably run a little over 15 minutes, but we'll keep it below 20. The first part of this presentation is going to specifically discuss Erikson's fifth stage of biopsychosocial development as it relates to Mr. C, who I am going to identify as my interviewee, or my interviewee will be identified as Mr. C. The second part of the video was going to be an additional theory that I felt was applicable to the stage of development I discussed related to Erikson, and then I will get into some of the limitations of Erikson's theory of biopsychosocial development. So Erikson's fifth stage of biopsychosocial development, Erikson discusses identity versus identity confusion. This happens within the adolescent years. All right, adolescents are exploring who they are and developing a sense of identity. They try out roles for the future and integrate these roles into their sense of self. This is important because adolescents that have difficulty integrating their roles into their identity tend to experience confusion about who they are older in life. Important life experiences. As I went through the interview process with Mr. C, there were some recurring themes as we discussed his early childhood and adolescent years. And domestic violence was extremely evident and had a tremendous impact on his life. The excessive alcohol use within the family, and then also significant environmental changes that happened during this stage in his life, specifically related to family, education, as well as the social environment. These all incorporated experiences that have really shaped who Mr. C is as a result of his experience within that adolescent period. Some of the challenges that Mr. C experienced during this stage in his life, intimacy, motivation, racism. He mentions intimacy and why it was so important to him because of the female role model that he had, who was his mother, who struggled with what he says are her own demons. He lacked motivation as a result of some of the things that were going on at home, and then at the same time, there was a lot of racism and oppression during this time period in his life based on his geographical area as well as the times. Through the adversity and through the challenges, he was able to accomplish some major feats in life during this stage. One being named the top ranking cadet in the ROTC program. He graduated high school when high school graduation rates were very low for African American males at that time. Not only did he graduate high school, he actually went off to college, got a full scholarship to college through the ROTC program. And, as he worked on finding himself and figuring out his identity, he was able to work through these things and really accomplish some magnificent things in his life. Biopsychosocial crisis resolution. Erikson talks about specifically the identity crisis when we look at the fifth stage. And, research has, made clear that identity development is a crucial role regarding the integrative function for an individual's traits, goals, needs, abilities, and commitments. With that being said, the aspects of identity put self into a coherent whole, which ultimately provides the basis for healthy psychological functioning throughout adulthood. And so this is why it is very the identity crisis is so important, and it happens at such an important time in an individual's life, because you're going from, you know, the codependent atmosphere of your parents or relying on your family into young adulthood and really coming into your own. So psychosocial crisis resolution. So, when I talk about these things, these are more going to be the biopsychosocial factors, that have facilitated or inhibited the resolution of the psychosocial crisis, right? How was he able to overcome the identity crisis? And I'm going to share a quote that Mr. C said in the interview, and he said, "At this time in my life, I believe I made good decisions, but I know they were not for the right reasons." So to add on to that specific statement, the community during his adolescence was racially and economically divided. During this period in life, Mr. C, he was unmotivated and unambitious. The two things that he did have a passion for were girls and sports. One of the caveats here is that the sports provided motivation for him to do better academically. Even though he only did enough to get by, he did enough to be able to continue to play sports. He enrolled in ROTC because he felt the uniform would get the attention of the opposite sex. In his culture, men were expected to work hard and provide for their family. His enrollment in ROTC led to a scholarship to college. And the uniform was intriguing, and it was seen as a statement because it commanded respect, and he wanted that. He wanted he wanted to feel attractive, and he wanted the respect, and that was the driving force that involved him in the ROTC program. Mr. C also made this statement: "I was the type of kid that went to the playground to fight the Caucasians." Mr. C, he's an African American male. He was a young teenager in the Midwest during the Civil Rights Movement. He experienced racial tensions and violence on a daily basis. During this period in his life, he spent a significant amount of time going to the local playgrounds to fight whites. The blacks and the whites fought, and he had the personality that was really into that type of activity. What we were able to get out of the interview process was, after time, what he realized is that he was going through a lot of internal hurt and shame and guilt that really resulted from the neglect and the domestic violence that he experienced at home. He was just transferring his anger onto others within the community. And he also made mention that, him and his brother would get into a fight. He was suspended from school early in high school for fighting his brother. And he said that he realized that it was the violence that they were seeing at home that really made them angry with the outside world, because they couldn't control the violence at home. So they lashed out, not just in the community, but at each other. At the time, Caucasians were identified as the enemy, due to the institutionalized racism he and his family experienced, as well as the systematic unfair treatment of blacks in America at that time. Another quote I'm going to share. My brother and I walked in the house after school and saw a trail of blood leading up the stairs. When we talk about applying a multi-systems lens, to examine how family, community, institutions, and larger social policy and social forces help hinder or help you succeed in life. This is a very, deep time within Mr. C's life. And, at age 14, his father took custody of him because his mother was abused physically and mentally by his stepfather. He came home from school where his mother was found on the floor. He said she was beaten so bad her face looked like Joe Frazier beat her up. His mother suffered from alcoholism. I'm sure that was due to just coping with the situation with her husband, and his stepfather literally refused a relationship with him because he was not his biological father. His father's side of the family, they nurtured and cultivated him psychosocially. They took him under his wing. His uncle was his spiritual guide, which ultimately led him to commit to Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. His aunt provided the maternal love and nurture, needed for a child, that children typically need from their mother. This helped his development with the intimacy. And helped his relationships with women, further down in life. His father was a hard worker, and instilled the importance of integrity and work ethic. Mr. C also gives a lot of credit to his faith and the U.S. military for really continuing to develop him, and also offering opportunities, throughout the rest of his life. For example, he met his wife when he was in the service, and they celebrated 40 years of marriage this year. So that is quite an accomplishment from a gentleman that has gone through so much, at a young age. I'm going to move into the second part of the video. I will see you shortly.